Hey guys, today's lesson is 3.3 and you're going to start by just doing this warm up on your own. So pause the video, try this problem, and then check your answer. You're evaluating each expression or this expression for these values. So just to help you start and set up, you're going to plug in each of these x values into the equation to get the y value. That's what evaluating for those x values means. Here are your final answers. They were 9, -3, and -6. So just to remind you, what you had to do is plug in each of these x values into the equation. What I like to do, just as a suggestion, is anywhere you see an x, put parentheses and then plug in your value. Make sure you incorporate the negatives. If they're out in front, leave them out in front of your parentheses. So we'll do this in a more formal way throughout this lesson. And the essential question you're going to think about is how can you use function notation to represent a function? So the first thing you're going to do is take a second to graph these equations and match them to their graph. So keep in mind, if you look at the notation right now, they all don't have y there. They have g of x or f of x or h of x or j of x. The variable out in front is just a way to name the function. So for an example, g is the function, and we say g of x to indicate that we're using the variable x in our equation. So first take a moment to just graph these into your graphing calculator. I'll do the first one with you, and you're going to match them to A, B, and C. So for the first one, it says f of x equals 2x minus 3. This is what goes into the y equals of my calculator. I go to y equals, I type in 2x minus 3, graph, and I have a line. So when I match it, I know that I'm looking at the line that's going from left to right, going upwards. It has a positive slope or rate of change. So that would be B. Okay, try that for the next 3 and then check your answer. So hopefully you graphed each of those in your calculators and notice that A matched with B, B matched with D, C matched with A, and D matched with C. All right, the next problem says evaluate f of x equals -4x plus 7 when x equals 2 and x equals -2. This is just like the warm-up and just like problems you've done last year. The only difference is the notation. We never ever want to take apart f of x. They go together. You don't want to divide by f. You don't want to divide by x. It's just like a symbol, just like a smiley face. You would not take an eye out of a smiley face. You don't ever want to separate those pieces. Looks a little crazy. Anyways, so when we do this, it's just notation, and it's just saying my function has the variable x it's depending on. So I take, basically, you want to write down the function notation, and you want to evaluate where x equals 2. So what I'm going to do is plug this 2 in to my function. So -4 times 2 is -8 plus 7, which is equal to -1. When you write your final answer, it's okay if you want to leave it here, but just get used to the notation. Instead of f of x, put the number that you evaluated for, so f of 2 is equal to -1. That's your final answer for evaluating when x equals 2. Now let's evaluate for -2. When x is equal to -2, I'm going to plug in -2 where the x goes. So I plug -2 into my parentheses and I simplify. -4 times -2 is +8 plus 7. This is equal to 15. And again, when you write your final answer, it's nice to have the value you evaluated for inside your parenthesis. That's your final answer. Let's apply this to a real-world problem. Let's say f of t is the temperature in Fahrenheit after t hours after 6 a.m. So in the morning, it's really chilly these days, but as it gets later in the day, notice that the temperature gets a little warmer for us. So it says explain the meaning of each statement. So let's start with the first one, f of 0. Remember, our original function is noted as f of t. T is the number of hours after 6 a.m. So when we look at number 1, f of 0 means 0 hours after 6 a.m. So when we write a sentence about what this means, we want to write about the time. So what time is it? 0 hours after 6 a.m. It's 6 a.m. So at 6 o'clock a.m. in the morning, what does it equal? 58 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, let's do letter B. F of 6. F of 6 means we're looking at 6 hours after 6 a.m. So I want you guys to think about that. 6 hours later would be at 12 o'clock p.m. So at 12 o'clock p.m. it is, and now what is the function equal? N degrees outside. Lastly, we have an inequality symbol here. So let's see what these functions represent and then talk about the meaning. 3 is 3 hours after 6 a.m. So this represents at 9 a.m. Read the symbol out loud to yourself. It says less than. So we're going to say that the temperature at 9 a.m. is less than the temperature at, and now decide what time is that. 9 hours after 6 a.m. is going to be 3 p.m. So at 9 a.m., we can even say it is colder than at 3 p.m. All right, evaluate h of x equals 2 over 3x minus 5. Find the value of x for which h of x is equal to negative 7. Notice this doesn't say for x equaling, it says for h of x equaling negative 7. So this is different. You want to take h of x and replace it with negative 7. So when I rewrite this to find the value of x, I'm plugging in negative 7 for the entire symbol h of x. Bring everything else down. So is equal to 2 over 3x minus 5. Then attempt to get x alone. Isolate that. When you try to isolate x, you have to start by adding 5 to each side. So you have negative 2 equals 2 over 3x. To remove that fraction in front of the x, multiply by the reciprocal, the opposite, flip it to both sides. On the right here, these will all cancel, and you'll have x is equal to, and I'm going to show you this on a calculator. 3 over 2 goes in parentheses, times, and what was the other value? Negative 2. Once you enter, you notice you get the answer of negative 3. So when you write your final answer here, x is equal to negative 3. The next problem says graph f of x equals 2x plus 5. In order to graph this, you need some points. So choose some negatives, some positives, and probably an easy number in between like 0. So go ahead, try to plug in each of these values into the function, get your y value, write your coordinates out, and plot your points. So I'm going to do the answer for you. You guys should pause the video and try it on your own. All right, you should have plotted your points. So here are your final answers. Whoops. Once you get your final answers, my suggestion is write them out as coordinates and then plot your points. Make sure you are connecting your points. Unless you're just given the coordinates, you were given a function, and that function's a line. So you want to plot the points and connect them. All right, here's an application problem for this unit on functions. The graph shows the number of miles a helicopter is from its destination after a certain number of X hours. On the second flight, the helicopter travels 50 miles further and increases the speed by 25 miles per hour. The function f of x equals 350 minus 125x is the second flight, where f of x is the number of miles the helicopter is from its destination after x hours. So in both cases, we know x represents hours, and the output y or f of x is how far the helicopter is from its destination. Notice that the first flight they're talking about is represented by the graph. So you should be able to compare this graph to the second flight, which has this equation. It says which flight takes less time. So let's analyze the graph for a moment. If we look at the graph, as x increases, as the number of hours increases, this helicopter is getting closer and closer to the destination. Notice over here, for an example, the destination is 50 miles away from the destination. So we know that it is decreasing that distance, and by 3 hours, we are at the destination for the first flight. So if we want to compare these two, let's find out when the second flight is at its destination. So here's the second flight's function. Now we know that it takes 3 hours to reach a distance of 0, meaning being at the destination. So it says in the word problem, f of x is the number of miles the helicopter is from the destination. So we're going to plug in 0 here to represent when does it arrive. So now we're solving this equation right here. Our first step to solve this equation is subtracting 350. Once you do that, we have negative 350 is equal to negative 125. X. Once you're done, divide by negative 125 on both sides, and you'll get that x is equal to, use your calculator. So now we know if it takes about 2.8 hours to reach the destination for flight 2, and here it takes, in the first flight, 3 hours, we know that the flight that takes less time is flight number 2.